and for your interest. As Rena said, I'll give you a quick overview of who Ubiquity Press is, first of all, because you may not know us. I know some people on the call do. And kind of the ethos behind why we got into the repository business, and then I'll give you a run through of what the repositories look like, how they're developing, and an idea of how we plan to market them and provide them. So, slides on. Oops. Hang on. So, just quickly about Ubiquity Press, we started as an open access publisher, and our mission is to publish cost efficiently open access journals, books, research data, and all that kind of thing. But we also provide our platform to university presses, libraries, national associations, and so forth to run their own publishing platforms. So we provide the entire infrastructure, back-end services, etc., to help make those initiatives successful. And there's the whole range of different services, from things like the London School of Economics or the University of California Press to the various journals online programs that used to run through INASP. So overall, at the moment, we have about 590 journals, 260 books, and then 30 plus partner presses on the platform. But we're a researcher-led company, and we spun out of University College London in the United Kingdom about 6 years ago. And our ethos really is very much one of doing things in the interests of researchers, not as a massive profit-making endeavor in publishing. And that's very much why we're also unconditionally open. So we really believe in the social contract of academia, that people agree to disseminate their work, to let other people validate it, to let other people further develop it. And that if you don't do that, it's really scientific malpractice. So as a publisher, we are completely dedicated to being open, fully open access, fully open source. And we really believe that a publisher that puts up paywalls or limits access to work is preventing academic communication rather than enabling it. So that's why we're 100% open. And that applies to results, data, software, everything associated with papers as well. And that's why repositories for us are very important, because it's about making all of the objects associated with publication as well open. And this is just a graphic which quickly explains sort of our ethos and with open in terms of the benefits. It applies equally well to our repositories as to our journals, that we really aim for people to be rewarded for sharing their work. We believe it leads to greater citations, career recognition, but it's all for the individual researcher. But for the community, it's very important because we want to make it easier to find academic resources. Certainly with the repositories, we don't intend them to be silos. We intend them to be highly discoverable places where people share content, and we track the sharing and demonstrate it's happening. We also intend them to be extremely good in terms of preservation, archiving, and so forth, and public access. And all of that is designed to help make research more efficient. But on the flip side as well, we also really believe that universities and institutions, societies making their content available in repositories is also very important for public trust in science, enabling more validation of research by people having access to the data behind the articles and things like that. So open access publication and open sharing in repositories are very much a twin strategy for us, with a lot of benefits. And so we also have a community charter now, which basically is our way of saying that we intend to continue to run the company exactly the same way in future, even if something happens like the change of control of the company, say we do become invested in by or taken over by a larger publisher or something like that, which there are certain ones that will never happen. But if it were to happen, we have a charter in place which says that even after that event, we would be 100% open access. Our platform would still be 100% open source, and none of our products would be bundled in any way. So really, all the things about the company, about the way it works well, would continue to happen. And for us, that's just really important about building trust with our customer base. And it's very, very important for the repository system. We have a case right now where, for example, in the United States, a large number of institutions, 500 plus, were on the Press platform, which was then acquired by Elsevier. And the majority of those institutions feel quite trapped at the moment because that's a proprietary platform. It's very hard to get their data out, etc. So what we've tried to put in place is something which is pretty much the opposite of that, as I'll explain. And a very important part of that is that everything is open source. So we're moving our entire Ubiquity platform, our journals, books, repositories, conferences, and presses to being open source. We've become a major development partner for open journal systems, which means that we use that as the backend for our journals for the editorial management side of things. And we contribute all of our code back to the core code base. And same thing with Hyku, is our other core platform. It's from the Samvera community in the United States. And every single thing there is open source as well. And that's really key, that everything we do for the repository platform is available in the core open source part of the product. If someone wants to stop hosting it with us, they can continue to run it themselves, or with another provider. They'll have exactly the same functionality, so there's very little lock-in. And right now, with the development partners for Hyku, we're working very directly with the Samvera community. One of the reasons we chose the Hyku platform for the repositories was because there was a very, very strong open source community behind it. It was originally developed at places like Stanford University and the University of Virginia in the United States. Has a large community of 20 plus very active large institutions developing on it. And Hyku is a new branch of that software which we're working with. And same thing with the Public Knowledge Project. Obviously, we work very closely with them now. And the British Library are right now our major development partner for the Hyku platform. And what I'll be showing you in a few moments is a demonstration, is the system that's being set up in collaboration with the British Library at the moment. So essentially what all of that really came down to is that it's all about no lock-in on the platform. We don't have any contractual lock-in. All of the systems we use are open source and open access, and everything used is open standards. So for example, any XML or any transfer protocols or anything like that in the system, they're all open. If anyone wants to leave at any time, they just leave. We hand everything over for free and they can continue to run it. So the goal really is that what we're providing is a cloud hosting solution with a high level of service, a lot of convenience and expert backup. But at the end of the day, people will stay with us because they like that. And if they won't feel locked in and stuck with us. And as part of that, we're a very community-driven company as well. So we have a steering board, which is made up of our institutional partners. So when I was talking before about our customer charter, they have the right to veto any future change of control of the company, etc., if that charter is not being upheld. So that's very important, that we actually have a large amount of control and steer from the community. And we're also putting in place partnership rules now as well that determine who we'll integrate and work with. So we won't integrate a product or company services into the platform if we don't believe they follow the same types of community-driven rules. They don't make guarantees about how they'll handle people's data and things like that. So that's also a key part of where we're heading. We don't want people to join our platform and then discover their data has gone to X large publisher because a component of the platform was purchased by them or something like that. Okay, so the repository system is what we would consider a real next generation repository. So a lot of university repositories, institutional repositories that I've worked with in the past have been very frustrating to work with. They felt like silos as much as anything. I finished my PhD recently with a large London university, and even uploading my thesis into the repository took about 3 days. It should have been a 5-minute file upload. In the end, I had to email the repository to them because their system kept breaking down. So to me, that's just not acceptable from a user point of view. But we also want repositories to be places where people consume content. They go to the repository to not just to download a file or to search for a file, but they go in there and they can actually read the file, they can interact with it, they can cite it, they can annotate it, all that kind of thing. And it's highly discoverable. So all the content should be appearing in Google Scholar and all the indexes and places that it possibly can. So that's kind of what we bring to repositories a little bit, is our publishing background and our publishing perspective. This is all about dissemination and increasing access to content. So not a silo. The good thing about Hyku is it's a very clean, new, modern system. It's a very clean, new code base. It's all based on Ruby for coding, which means we attract very high-quality developers to work on the system. And it means we have full control over it as well. We really are starting with a nice clean slate, and we can add all the features we want from the beginning. We don't have any legacy features that we're not quite happy with or anything like that. It's a brand new scaffold for us. So it's currently in the pilot and final development phase. We're working in the United States with a group of pilot universities, University of Pennsylvania, Penn State and Gonzaga University, in Canada with Western University, and in the United Kingdom with the British Library, British Museum, Tate, National Museums of Scotland, and Museum of London Archaeology, which is a consortium. And the main reason we're working especially with those United Kingdom players is because Hyku is also a multi-tenant system, and which means that you can set up one instance of it and then very quickly create replica tenants for different institutions. So one host institution can provide repositories for multiple others. And this is what we're looking at doing with the British Library in the United Kingdom, that they would be a provider of repository services using this platform to other museums and so forth in the United Kingdom. And you can very quickly do that for a library consortium, for example. You can create an instance and then provide one version of the repository for every member library, for example. It's a very, very quick turnkey way to do that. It takes literally about 4 minutes to create a repository. And of course, we're also interested in more partners during the pilot phase if anyone is interested in becoming involved. The full production release is going to be in June this year. So the repository will be up and running with the first customers in production by then. At the moment, it's still in pilot. So very quickly, the current features of the system: it has a very customizable front end, has administration modules, generic schemas and workflows. It's multi-tenant. It came, when we started working on it, had a very simple bulk import feature. We've now expanded that out to be able to import from a wide range of different repositories. It comes with support for licensing and embargoes and search. But what we're doing right now is we're really building a lot more features into the system to make it more feature complete. So adding a lot of schemas and workflows in, especially in collaboration with the British Library metadata experts. It's one thing we're extremely fortunate to have a partner like the British Library, because they are really providing us with the most complete metadata we could possibly have. And I'll give you a demonstration in a few moments of adding an article into the repository, and the amount of metadata you can add is quite extensive. And we're working with trying to make as many deposit types as possible doable. So not just articles and books, but conference papers, research data, reports, theses, software, etc. We're trying to make it a repository that's not just a PDF. One, it's also suitable for uploading large data sets and things like that, and it has appropriate metadata for those different work types. We're working on Shibboleth and LDAP integration for institutions, expanding the multi-tenancy administration and reporting, adding in work for things like ORCID, Crossref, and data sites, so you can automatically pull the metadata from those different systems, mint DOIs, and that kind of thing. Working on a full import and export system, integrating the universal viewer so that all different types of content are viewable within the system, adding in annotation from hypothesis, and adding full metrics as well. So as a publisher, one of the things we want is when people to look at an article, for example, in a repository, want them to see the same sorts of metrics they see in a journal. So the views, the downloads, citations, the social media activity, all that kind of thing. And also working on migration. So right now, probably the main platforms that people are trying to migrate from are the Press platform and some others that are in many ways a little bit out of date, so ePrint, Content.dm, DSpace. And very quickly, the publishing integration side. The other side to it is, as a publisher, we want the repository to be fully integrated with our journal publishing. So they'll be fully integrated with the Ubiquity publishing system, and we'll also produce plugins for the Open Journal system. And what that means is all the hosted and full service journals will work seamlessly with the repository. So that means any article published can be automatically deposited to the repository as a green open access copy, either all articles or just or from authors from a particular institution. All the data associated with articles can be deposited during the article submission process and made available for peer reviewers and so forth. But it then goes to the repository, it receives a DataCite DOI, it's cross-referenced in the articles, and it's fully citable. All the books that we publish on the platform will be automatically pushed to repositories. Same thing with conference papers from our conference system. And we also have metrics aggregation, which means that the metrics on the journal and the metrics on the repository for an article or a book will be aggregated. So the number of downloads in total will be shown on both screens. They won't be different. So if someone is reading articles in the repository, that will be reflected in the journal as well. The author won't lose those statistics. And yes, and then full metrics in the repository that showed up out of order. And this is a quick look at what the system looks like. So this is the multi-tenant system that's being set up through the British Library with its partners. And the idea really is that they will be able to provide probably for up to 30 or 40 different institutions repository services. And I'll skip through, and what I'll do is I'll give you a very quick look at the back end, what's involved in uploading an article to the system, just so you can have a look at the metadata of it. And then I'll kind of open things up for questions. Let's see. So this is the back end of the system. And it's a very clean, neat system. It has full functionality. We're adding in things like a full reporting engine later on, so you can write your own reports and so forth. But right now you get this type of reporting. You can see quickly at a glance exactly what kind of activity is happening in the system. You can jump through and see which components are working and not working, just in case anything's not. So we provide obviously an SLA that we will ensure that everything works with high availability. And the different types at the moment that we can of work that we can add displayed here. So we currently have very rich metadata for articles, books, book contributions, conference items, data sets, images, reports, and more generic works. This will be expanded, of course, to include things like manuscripts and that kind of thing. But right now, it's actually taking quite extensive work just to build up the metadata for each of these things. And of course, you're also able to create your own work types as well, or to take these and fork them and create versions of them as well. So looking at just an article to give you an idea of what the quality of the system is. I'll just jump through. I won't show you every single field or anything like that. As you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, you can change the visibility, obviously, of the work. You can make things public or accessible only to the institution that owns the repository. You can embargo them, lease them, or keep them private. And you have to, of course, agree to a deposit agreement. And then you can basically, at the top of the screen, you also have a DataCite. Button here, which means if you have a DOI for the work that you're adding, you can enter it there and it will pull back all of the details of it, so you don't have to type them in yourself. And it'll be the same with Crossref. On the description side, obviously you have the usual things like the title, the resource type, creator names, but we can pull creator information back from ISNI and ORCID, which is very important. So we can pull the author name and everything from there, and we can also make sure that the ORCID profile is updated with information about the resource. Scrolling down, we also have the ability to, so the British Library has been very specific about adding as much metadata as possible, so you can determine the relationship of the author to their institution, as well as just stating which institution it is, so forth. I'll just jump through. You have multiple different types of identifiers other than DOIs that you can have, including things like ISNIs, ARCs, ISBNs, ISSNs, etc. And you can also describe the relationship to the identifier. You have a lot of information about the publisher, etc., place of publication, ISSNs. Article numbers if needed. All the information about publication. So right now, this isn't necessarily the metadata everybody would see. You have a small list at the beginning. You click if you want to add more. So this is the extended metadata, but full details about when an article was published, when it was accepted, when it was submitted, that kind of thing, which is very useful if you're trying to ascertain whether the article you're reading in a repository is the correct version. Is it the publisher version? Is it the or just the submitted version, that kind of thing. Full keywords, Library of Congress classifications, information about the peer review of the item, whether it's been reviewed and to what level, that kind of thing. If it was involved with a project, which one was it, who was the funder, and the funding information is pulled from the FundRef system, so that means also that the funders are notified that there are outputs from the funded research in the repository. Language licensing, whoops, my screen, yep. For licensing, you have a full range of licenses. This isn't quite complete because it's showing software licenses as well. But you have the ability to add any type of licensing, and they're not just Creative Commons. And for software, of course, you have all the various open source licenses. But we'll also be adding licensing in that's more specific for data and for non-North American or European countries that maybe have other licensing laws. And alongside the license, you also have the ability to state very explicitly what the copyright of the object is. So just because it's got a Creative Commons license doesn't mean it's not in copyright. So you have to be then explicit about what that means in more human readable terms for people. And that is very much how is an example of what it's like to deposit an article. And it's the same for other things. The data object, so research data deposit, follows a slightly different metadata schema. It's based on the data site schema. So it's highly appropriate, but it means that the articles will be properly archived with respect to data and so forth. And the whole system is based on the Portland Common Data Model, which is really designed to make the objects transportable to other systems if they need to be in the future through common metadata fields. And then in terms of the pricing of the system, the basic pricing is going to be in the range of $5,000 to $20,000 per year for an institution. And we're working on the institution on the pricing for whether that institution then has tenants as well. And that's basically going to be a flat fee depending on the size of the institution. Plus, then if they're also archiving large amounts of research data, there will have to be an additional fee just to cover the additional storage and download costs of that storage. But for countries that have funding issues and so forth, or in the developing world and so forth, we have special pricing, and we're going to be looking at around about $1,000 per year, plus cost for excessive data. So we're trying to price the repository according to make it affordable. And we anticipate probably having rather a large number of repositories running in places like developing countries, because we think it's a highly affordable system. It's one which is extremely turnkey. It's totally hosted. There's absolutely no configuration or IT support required from the institution that's running the repository. And we're also able to provide things like in-country data storage and things like that. So that it's not just a system that's hosted in the cloud in Europe or in North America, but we can actually be hosting components of the system within those countries as well, so that in the longer term, there's this continued ownership of the objects and data, and potentially taking over and running the repositories within those countries in the longer term. So we're not trying to set up a system that's purely run from the outside, but one that can be operated on a more shared basis as well. And at that point, I'll turn things over to questions.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Please use either text chat or Q&A functionality to type your questions.
I know that one of the things if I had a little more time, I might have added in was a bit of a comparison with other systems as well. So I can answer questions about that as well. I know you mentioned systems like Invenio and so forth.
There is one question. What was the data schema you mentioned Hyku uses?
So Hyku uses the Portland Common Data Model, which it's not as a unique system. It's made up of other systems, such as has a lot of elements from Dublin Core and so forth. But it's really designed to be about portability of objects within repositories. So it's very specific for that purpose, but it has a lot of elements of other schemas as well.
Thanks. There is also a question from Alexei. Thank you very much for information. Do you have any links to see repository online?
That's something I should have also included. We have a page on our website about repositories at the moment, and I can actually send a link to that afterwards, and I can send a link to the British Library system. It's not fully public yet, the BL system. It will be within, I think, the next 4 weeks, because it's still going through pilot testing. So probably the best advice is if anyone is really interested in playing with the repository a bit more, we can provide a pilot instance and logins. But the main repositories will be publicly available from June. So one of the things we were planning to do originally was we were hoping to also provide Invenio repositories as an alternative to Hyku, because we felt that Hyku would be more suitable for small institutions. We were thinking about it as a Bpress replacement specifically. Because originally we didn't want to get involved in repositories. It was all of a sudden when Elsevier required Bpress, everybody asked us to provide them. And so that was the first model. But what we found since, first of all, Invenio wasn't ready as open source quite yet to be taken up. And what we then found was that Hyku actually was very suitable for large institutions as well. So all of a sudden you have the British Library potentially looking at integrating 20 or 30 of its products into the system. So abandoning other systems and using Hyku for them instead. And very large institutions in the United States that we thought would be way too big actually showing a lot of interest as well. Especially institutions that in the past would have adopted an open source product like Samvera or DSpace and hired a couple of developers and put another couple of staff members onto building out their own version of a repository, have sort of decided now that it's not worth doing that, and that it's better to take a externally hosted, more turnkey solution, and then spending those other resources in other areas, like working with researchers on encouraging them to deposit or improving the quality of their data, that kind of thing. So in the end, we've decided to go purely with Hyku. We'll think about Invenio more in the future, but we really feel that Hyku can offer everything that everybody needs. So we've narrowed down our offering.
There are 2 questions from Narcissa. If we have a complete repository, how will it fit in Hyku? Would you download all data and visual design of repository? In that case, would we have our own web page?
Do you mean, is that related to, do you think, to moving from a current repository to Hyku?
Yes.
Yes, so Hyku's it's fully customizable in terms of look and feel on the front end. You have your own website with your own URL, and it's fully customized to you. We migrate all the data across. So we're working on bpress, ePrints, and dspace migration at the moment. But as customers have come from other systems, we'll implement migrations toolkits for that. All those toolkits, of course, will also be open source. They won't be proprietary. Yes, but everything gets fully migrated. And the good news about the system is that when things are migrated in, we don't do any import functionality without export functionality. So it's going to be very, very easy to get all content out of the system in very common formats that can be moved to other repositories if need be in future. It's really about no lock-in.
And Narcissa, Brian's email is on his slides, and I will email you his slides and also an email, so you'll get it.
I'll also add the link to the repository page to the slides.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Milica is asking whether migration from an existing repository charged separately.
Yes, so there'll be a setup charge, which is probably about the same as the annual fee, but we would set it on a case-by-case basis depending on what migration was required. So we have a team that are expert at doing migration work, and we can determine which skills we have, which skills you have, and who wants to do which part of the work. So generally, we would receive the output from the other repository and put it into shape so it's ready to go into the Hyku system. But then you may want to spend some time, for example, cleaning up metadata, standardizing, or duplicating elements and things like that. So we would work with you on that. But we would price it according to the exact costs. Once it's something like a bpress migration, once we've done one, then the next one's very cheap and easy to do. Or out of something like Content DM. But other systems like dspace, which are often highly customized with multiple different work types with different metadata schemes, there can be more work involved. But what we do is we provide a quote in each case.
Thanks.
I hope that made sense.
Any other questions or comments?
One thing I should say there is also the system has full import functionality available to you as well. So you don't necessarily have to pay us to do a migration or to import content. You can do all of that yourself as well. We're just there to help if need be.
Thanks a lot. I guess if there are no other questions or comments, we will email you slides, and maybe we could plan another webinar when the platform is launched sometime in summer or early autumn.
Yeah, anyone should feel free to email me anytime if you have any questions. I'll get back to you straight away.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian, and thanks a lot for your interest to partner with other countries and other institutions, and thanks to Ubiquity Press for the great work you are doing. Then I wish you all a very nice weekend. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye.